What you are about to hear never made it into the official broadcast summary. But it happened. Every word of it. The moment no one expected began with a single word, spoken by a contestant on the Family Feud stage with the ease of someone who has been saying it for so long in private that he had genuinely stopped hearing what it sounded like. The audience heard it. Steve Harvey heard it, and 300 people who had come to watch a game show found themselves, without any warning, inside something entirely different. The date was February 17th, 2021. Studio 23, Trilith Studios, Atlanta, Georgia. Steve Harvey put down his cards, walked to the center of the stage, and said 4 words that have since appeared in sermons, in social media posts, in therapy transcripts, and in at least one commencement address at a historically black university in North Carolina. The Whitmore family came through the contestant entrance in coordinated royal blue. 4 siblings, and a cousin from Detroit, Michigan, assembled by the eldest brother, Calvin Whitmore, 37, who had organized the application process, arranged the travel, booked the hotel, purchased and distributed the matching outfits, and conducted an informal strategy session in the hotel lobby the previous evening. Calvin was a floor supervisor at an automotive parts plant in Wayne County. He was the firstborn of 4. He had operated his entire life under the assumption that firstborn meant primary, and primary meant authority, and authority meant you were the one who made the calls, and everyone else was in a supporting role. He had never once been given a reason to question this framework. Until now. He was large in the room. Not physically, in the way some people are large in rooms, drawing attention and air and the social axis of every group they occupy, without doing it consciously or understanding the effect it creates on the people consistently orbiting them. His sister Angela, 34, stood at the end of the family line. She was a night shift pharmacy technician at a Walgreens in Southfield. She had been working the night shift for 6 years because the pay differential was $1.40 more per hour, and that $1.40 had mattered enormously during the period between 2017 and 2019, when she had been covering $340 of Calvin's monthly expenses without telling him it was covering rather than lending. She was wearing the royal blue shirt, which fit improperly because it had been ordered by Calvin without anyone asking her size. She had rolled the sleeves. She had done this in the hotel bathroom at 7 a.m. without mentioning it to anyone. She had spent 34 years being Calvin's sister in the particular way that the youngest and only girl in a family of determined men sometimes spends their life, competent beyond what anyone asked for, noticed only when something went wrong, and so accustomed to both conditions that she had stopped distinguishing between them some years back. She had covered Calvin's grocery bills for 4 months in 2019, using a Venmo transfer labeled for the kids, because Calvin's pride would not permit him to ask for help, but would permit him to accept money that arrived under a different name. She had driven him to 2 medical appointments he would not make himself, because making them alone meant acknowledging they were necessary. She had hosted his daughter's birthday party in her own apartment because his was too small, spent $340 on decorations, catering, and a custom cake, and watched him post about it on Instagram under a caption that read, "The family pulled through." He had tagged her. He had not thanked her. She had said nothing about any of this, partly because she loved him, genuinely, in the complicated and durable way of siblings who have survived the same childhood and carry that between them in a way no one outside can fully access. Partly because the pattern was so old she no longer had a clear vantage point from which to see it. Partly because the 2 times she had tried to bring any part of it to the surface, Calvin had looked at her with such authentic bewilderment, as if she were describing the behavior of someone he did not recognize, that she had gone quiet and wondered if the problem was her perception rather than the pattern. Her niece, Calvin's daughter Bria, 8 years old, had asked Angela at Easter, "Aunt Angie, how come you always do things for Daddy, but he doesn't do things for you?" Angela had said, with the patient smile she kept ready for this type of question, "That's just how families work sometimes, baby." Bria had considered this with the seriousness of a child who is not yet old enough to understand the rules that say certain truths are not supposed to be said out loud. She said, "That doesn't sound right." Angela had given her a piece of chocolate cake and changed the subject. She had thought about those 4 words, "That doesn't sound right," every day for 3 months. She had written them in her journal. She had discussed them with her therapist, whom she saw every other Thursday, and whom Calvin did not know about. She had agreed to Family Feud because Calvin had asked, and she had said yes. The way she said yes to things Calvin asked, the way the groove in her life where yes to Calvin lived, was so worn and so established that sometimes she stepped into it before she had consciously decided to. The game moved through its first 2 rounds without any obvious incident. Calvin played hard and with genuine skill, fast at the buzzer, good at survey logic, effective at reading the room. He was everything a team captain should be. Angela answered once in the first round. Her answer, strong, precise, landing in the second position on the board, prompted Calvin to reach across her body, physically, to get to the podium faster for the follow-up. He did not do it with force. He did not do it with any awareness that he had done it. He moved her the way you move a chair that is between you and where you need to be. Angela stepped aside. She found her place again at the edge of the family line. Steve Harvey watched this. He said nothing yet. The second incident happened between rounds when Steve was doing his conversational touring of the stage. He asked Calvin about Detroit. Calvin answered, entertaining, expansive, generous with the detail. Steve asked whether the family had always been close. Calvin said they were. He said, with the warmth of a man making a compliment, "Angie especially, she'll do anything for this family. She's basically our staff." He laughed. 2 or 3 audience members laughed. Several others did not. The laughter that did exist died quickly. In the particular way laughter dies when a room is collectively uncertain whether it has just heard something funny or something that shouldn't have been said. Steve Harvey stopped. He walked one deliberate step closer to Calvin and stopped there and let the silence fill in around the space before he put anything into it. "Both of you come here," he said. His voice was level. It was not raised. It did not need to be. Angela and Calvin both moved toward him. Angela's hands were at her sides. Calvin's expression had not changed yet. He was still carrying the social ease of someone who has not understood that the room has shifted. Steve looked at Calvin steadily. He said, "You just called your sister your staff." Calvin started to laugh. It was a defensive laugh, the instinctive kind. Steve did not laugh. "I'm not going to let that sit there," Steve said, "because I've been watching this whole episode. And I watched you move her out of the way of the podium like she was furniture. And I've watched you answer questions for her before she could answer them herself. And now I've heard you describe her, on national television, with cameras running, as the person who does things for your family." He stopped. "She is not your staff. She is your sister. And the fact that you can say that word in the same sentence as her name and laugh about it tells me something very specific about what goes on when the cameras aren't here." The studio fell completely silent. Calvin's expression had changed now. The ease was gone. What replaced it was not defensiveness, not yet. It was something more complicated, a man standing in front of a mirror he did not arrange to stand in front of, seeing something he cannot immediately argue with. "I didn't mean it like that, I know you didn't," Steve said. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. You never mean it. You've never meant it. And she has been absorbing it for a very long time without ever telling you, because she loves you, and because the pattern is so old that neither one of you can quite see it anymore." He turned to Angela. His voice changed completely. "You good?" Angela looked at Steve Harvey. Her jaw moved once. Then she said, quietly and with the particular clarity of someone who has been holding something for years and has just been offered a place to set it down, "I have been good for a long time. I would like someone to ask." 304 people in that studio did not move. A lighting technician in the upper rig pressed his hand flat over his earpiece. A producer off camera set her clipboard down on the floor and did not pick it up again. Steve Harvey looked at Angela for a long moment, the kind of moment that is not comfortable and is not meant to be comfortable, but is completely necessary. Then he turned back to Calvin and said, in the quiet, serious voice he reserves for the things that matter most, "Your sister just told you something true. She said she would like someone to ask. That means in 34 years, nobody has been asking her what she needs. And you are the big brother. You organize this team. You run the family. Which means you have the power to change what this family looks like. You can decide right now that it changes." He paused. "Start with asking her." He wasn't finished. He turned to the camera. "I want to speak to every older sibling watching right now. The ones who run the family text chain. The ones who make the reservations and give the directions and decide who sits where at Thanksgiving. The ones the younger ones learned to defer to because it was simpler than pushing back, and who never realized that simple for them was a cost someone else was paying." He stopped. "You might be doing an extraordinary amount. And you might also, without knowing it, be taking an extraordinary amount. Both of those things can be true at the same time. And the second one does not cancel out because of the first." The competing family, from Houston, had gone completely still on the other side of the stage. Their team captain, a woman named Denise, raised her hand quietly. Steve nodded at her. Denise looked directly at Angela and said, "My sister did the same thing for our family for 20 years. Nobody asked her either. I see you." She sat back down. Angela put her hand over her mouth. She held it there for a long time. But Steve wasn't done. He paused the game formally and arranged for Angela to be connected with a financial counselor and a career development advisor through the Steve Harvey Foundation's Family Resource Network. The foundation provided a $9,500 grant to cover 4 months of living expenses, while Angela completed the Pharmacy Technician to Pharmacist Bridge program, a program she had applied to twice and deferred both times when money got tight. Her acceptance letter was in her email. She had not told a single person. Calvin found out about the acceptance letter on the stage of Family Feud in front of 300 people from Steve Harvey. He said nothing for several seconds. Then he said, very quietly, "I didn't know you applied." Angela said, "You didn't ask." When the episode aired 9 weeks later, the segment reached 38 million views across all platforms in 22 days. The comment that was replicated most across every language it appeared in was 7 words, "I would like someone to ask." 3 months after the taping, Calvin called Angela on a Tuesday evening. He did not need anything. He called to ask about the pharmacist program. He asked how many credit hours it required. He asked about the exam format. He asked if she needed help covering any expenses during the exam preparation period. He was not smooth on the call. He said the wrong thing twice. then corrected himself. He kept going. A year later, Angela passed her pharmacist licensure examination on her first attempt. Calvin was in the waiting room of the testing center when she came out. He had driven from Detroit without telling her. He had a coffee for her, and a bouquet of flowers so large it was embarrassing, which he had purchased from a florist 40 minutes away because the grocery store bouquets had seemed insufficient. He had arrived 45 minutes early and sat in a plastic chair and waited. Today, Angela Whitmore is a licensed pharmacist. She supervises 2 technicians. She works 4 days a week and spends her Fridays with Bria, who is 10 and who has recently announced she intends to become either a scientist or a judge. Angela tells her, aim for both. Bria says, that doesn't sound possible. Angela says, that doesn't mean it isn't right. Calvin and Angela have dinner together on the first Sunday of every month. He always pays. He always insists. It is not a transaction. It is the shape of a thing being repaired, slowly, over meals, one first Sunday at a time. Share this with your sibling. Not because it will fix everything overnight, but because a conversation that is 20 years overdue still has to start somewhere. If this moment moved you, subscribe and ring the notification bell. Leave a comment about someone in your family who has been carrying things quietly. And then, close the app and go ask them what they need. In a 2022 interview, Steve Harvey was asked what he remembered about that episode. He said he remembered the way Angela held her hand over her mouth when Denise spoke to her from the other side of the stage. He said she wasn't sad. She was overwhelmed by being seen. There's a difference you learn to recognize after enough years of watching people. Sadness looks down. Being seen looks up. She looked up. Calvin has said, in his own words in a brief public statement, that he still thinks about the word he used. He has said he does not use it as a reason to stay who he was. He uses it as a measurement, a marker for the distance he has traveled and the distance that remains. He has said he did not know, until that day, that a person can love someone completely and still fail to see them. He has said learning the difference between those two things is the work of every day now, and that he does not expect to finish it, and that he has stopped expecting to be done. Bria Whitmore, who is 10 years old and sharp in the way of a child raised near honest people, asked her father last Christmas what his New Year's resolution was. Calvin said he was going to keep asking questions he hadn't been asking. Bria thought about this. Then she said, like what Aunt Angie said? Calvin said yes. Exactly like that. Bria nodded and went back to her book. That is what change looks like sometimes. Not dramatic, not announced. A man at a Christmas table making a promise to a 10-year-old who already knows whether he's keeping it. The Whitmore family goes to the restaurant on the first Sunday. Calvin pays. Angela orders whatever she wants. Nobody decides for her what she'll have. There is a Calvin in a great many families. The eldest child who runs things efficiently and loves people genuinely and has simply, over decades of being the one in charge, forgotten to ask what the people around them would do if they were not always managing. The firstborn who made the matching shirts and booked the hotel and ran the pregame briefing and called the family group chat and believed, without examination, that doing all of that was the same as seeing the people it was done for. It is not the same thing. Doing is not seeing. Managing is not knowing. Running the family is not the same as being present for every person in it. Angela knew this. Angela has known this since she was watching her brother at Easter, and her niece said that doesn't sound right, and she could not find a way to say, "You're correct, baby, it doesn't sound right," because it isn't right. I have been absorbing it for 30 years, and I have run out of places to put it. She didn't run out of places. She ran out of the willingness to keep finding new ones. She walked onto a Family Feud stage in matching royal blue and said what was true. And Steve Harvey held up his hand and made room for it, and the room was full, and the cameras were live, and it still needed to be said. It needed to be said. That is the whole story. And every word of it is true.